Welcome to the Lake County School Board meeting, Monday, August 10th, 2020. We have a regular school board meeting. We will call the meeting to order, and we will have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Matthias. Thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hello again, and welcome to our school board meeting. Board, do we have any changes, amendments, additions, or deletions to the agenda?
You have one addition. It's an HR addendum. It's item 9.01.
Okay. Anything else? Nope. All right, we're on to approval of the minutes. Superintendent?
I recommend approval of the minutes from the school board workshop, June 29th, 2020, the special school board meeting public hearing, July 13th, 2020, and the regular school board meeting, July 13th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. On to representation, we don't have any, and public input. All right, Dr. Weiskopf, how many public input do we have today?
Dr. Burns, I have one in person.
Okay, let's go with that.
Mr. Seat, can we get Mr. Serdar? Mr. Serdar, if you will give your name and address for the record, excuse me, and then you have 3 minutes.
David Mitchell Serdar, 66 Wintergreen Drive, Fruitland Park, Florida, 34731. This is this is our land of the free. From sea to shining sea, home of the brave. It's election time, and you folks are special because you've been elected. And some of you are running for office. God bless you for what you do. I was active. I did my petitions. I'm active for a Lake County Water Authority, but I didn't do my qualifying. But I've run for office before. I've been here before. My dad was a principal. I called, Buddy Dyer, Orlando's mayor. I wear his pin. I'm a certified commercial cleaner. I work with Chris Castro out of Buddy Dyer's office, who is the residence and sustainability director. I'm worried about our kids' future. I used to work for Leesburg High School. I've been public commenting. I've had meetings with Jimmy Connors when he was a commissioner with David Heath before Jeff Cole was the manager. I'm worried about America. I work with Senator Baxley directly, and Saturday, Mark Morris of the Villages opened up a Republican headquarters. Joe Grunners was there, chairman, Republican Party chairman of the Republican Party of Florida at the George Bush Republican Center in Tallahassee, but he's also a senator, a concerned citizen, working for our future. Bill Galvano, I was there. I asked to be appointed to the St. Johns River Water Management District. I've got a bottle bill in front of our kids' future. It's never been like this before. My mother, she's 92 years old. Somebody told me I'm as old as dirt. I just turned 65. I get to fish for free. I love to fish. And I work with representatives. Brett Haig at a 10 a.m. meeting, representative 33rd District, whose office says they may call for me. Daniel Webster I was honored to be in front of at the 10 a.m. Brownwood opening. Tuesday, July 7th, Jerry Demings, Orange County Mayor, just awarded me a little pin. I've been to Hernando County at a 9 a.m. meeting. I've been to Citrus County. If you look in the back of your high school, Leesburg, you may see 3 machines with recycle on it. I am worried about our kids' future. I've been to Hernando County. We need to support our police. We need to, today there's an Orlando meeting going on right now. Citrus County, I went to 1 p.m. We got to thank our men in blue. Governor DeSantis, I just made a call to Brenda Burnett and External Affairs and Lexi Moskwa, the First Lady's aide, because life goes on. She just had a baby on March 30th. Life's full of prayers. My dad gave me a prayer book. My dad was a principal at the same school he went to as a child. I'm worried about our kids' future. I may be appointed St. Johns River Water Management District. I have some rich history. My Uncle Paul was the Illinois racehorse chairman. And that pin right there, I am so honored, came down in a little black box. July 7th. Last week I was with Kent Quinn, who has an open program. A lot of kids are on drugs. Well,
Mr. Singh,
I want
we're
you
all
to know.
done. We're all done.
Thank
Wrap
you
it
so
up.
much. I've been around the county, through Central Florida, all
Yep.
over the place to try and save
Thank you.
our
Thank you,
kids'
sir.
future. Bye-bye.
Right.
Thank you very much, sir. Do we have any virtual speakers? Yes?
We do. She's coming into the waiting room.
Right.
Melissa Padilla, I think.
The,
Padilla.
she is a teacher at Leesburg High. She spoke a while ago. We're ready for you when you can hear us, Melissa. Or Miss Padilla.
You will have 3 minutes if you'll give your name and address for the record whenever you start. Actually, whenever we can
Can't
hear you. We can't hear you.
Unmute. I can't see her well enough.
Okay, okay, now you're muted, so unmute and you'll be good to go. But her microphone's muted. No, your microphone is muted.
Unmute.
There you go.
There we go.
I think you're with us.
How about now?
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect.
Okay, did you hear what I said about the 3 minutes and your name and address?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, can you hear us?
Okay, now you're muted, so unmute and you'll be good to go.
I did. I'm unmuted.
You have a bit
okay.
of a lag. Go ahead and turn down the volume so we can hear you. Wait, is that right?
Yeah, because it's back feeding.
Okay. How about now? Okay.
Okay, you're on YouTube, so there's going to be a 30-second delay. So we'll watch your lips move, and then we'll listen to you. So
Go
you
ahead.
have 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Okay, that works.
Go.
Okay, so hi, my name is Melissa Padilla. I teach at Leesburg High School. I believe you need my address. That is 1033 Willow Drive, Leesburg, Florida. And I wanted to start off by saying the last time I spoke, I didn't get to say my thank you. So I have seen firsthand, especially today, all of the stuff the board is doing to help keep teachers and students safe, especially testing. I waited my 2 hours in line, stuck my finger today. And I really appreciate that that is happening. I do have a question, and I was told that those could be addressed today about the testing. Basically, it was my understanding that serology testing, meaning testing done by blood, detected antibodies. And so I contacted our resident science expert, Dr. Burns, and asked, am I incorrect in saying that? Because I thought those tests couldn't tell you if you have COVID currently, and I was confused how they were being used. So she sent me a bunch of research and said, I understand your concern, take a look at this. And I did. And according to the FDA, and I'm quoting their page on EUA test serology, that in the early days of infection, when the body's immune response is still building, antibodies may not be detected, which limits the test effectiveness for diagnosing COVID-19. And that's the reason serology or blood tests should not be used as the sole basis to diagnose COVID-19. So then I talked to her about that and went further into it. And according to mdpi.com, which is a science abstract that I tried to go through, basically, to break it down, I can show you the full deal. Only 50% of patients will test positive, even though they have COVID, using serology, and the average timing is 5 days instead of 3. So I'm just concerned that the 3-day number, I don't understand where that comes from in testing people for 3 days and then saying if they have a negative that they're clear and good. And I'm afraid of what a false sense of security does. And I understand what we're trying to accomplish. And I'm very appreciative of that. That's why I got tested today also. I just wanted someone to maybe talk on, if possible, or you guys can discuss with the test makers where that 3-day number comes from to make sure that's safe. I'm not sure how I'm doing on time because I'm having trouble hearing you guys. So just wave your hands if I'm over, and I'll stop. But my husband got sick this summer, and when he did, he had to be quarantined in our home. And the second he got his negative test, the first thing we were all doing is acting different, hugging, and changing our behavior because we knew we were safe. So I would hate for our students and parents and teachers to go, oh, I've gotten this test says I'm good, and to feel a sense of security that might not be correct.
Great. Dr. Burns, we have
Yes.
Mr. Caddy. I've asked him to come to the mic, and he's going to be giving an entire presentation in just a few minutes. But Melissa, while we have you, I thought you'd want to hear it firsthand. So Matt,
Sure.
if you can address her concern.
She brought up a couple good points there, and I'll just go kind of segment by segment. The first one is just the concept of actually, I'll start with the serology test. So your body begins to build antibodies almost immediately upon an infection. There's two different types of antibodies we look for. It's IgM and IgG.
Correct.
And right now, an IgG would tell you that you've had it prior to now and your body's already fought off the infection. And an IgM antibody would tell you if you are currently infected. That test that we're using has a well above 90% sensitivity at the 72-hour mark post-contact, which almost puts it in line with, say, a PCR test, which also takes them probably 72 hours for it to replicate enough in the system to be tested. That said, the reason why you've seen the introduction of these kind of late in the game in this is due to the fact that most of your nationwide labs right now are backed up 12 to 21 days on processing PCRs. So like you said, you had to sit at home and wait for those results to come back. Being that at the 3-day mark that we can test for an IgM with almost the same accuracy I can test with a serology test at that point, it makes sense to use the rapid test to rapidly identify those that may be at risk and then confirm it with the PCR test. But at that point, you're already in quarantine. But if we can return people back to school and back to work quicker, we thought it would be a benefit. And this is something you're seeing almost worldwide now. As these labs fall farther and farther behind, the rapid tests are coming out. Now, when rapid tests had first come out in the beginning of the COVID, they were awful. They had somewhere as low as a 62% accuracy rate. And so you watched us struggle all since March with these 10 to 20-day turnaround times. And only recently did we find a level of comfort with the rapid test. That's probably going through over a dozen different types of tests, our own internal studies, and then also, like you had said, researching the emergency use authorization and the FDA paperwork. So although I don't think there's really a perfect scenario right now, you almost have to build the best scenario with what the capabilities are. Florida being as hard hit as they are, our labs are probably the most backed up in the country. Does that make sense? And so anyway, it is positive. They do get confirmed with the PCR, but current medical research does tell us that using a dual antibody test as an early screening tool is not only a good idea, but basically going to be the way of the future.
All right. Thank you,
Okay.
Matt. Thank you, Melissa, for your coming online and asking about it.
I appreciate you letting me hear a response. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank you, Melissa. We'll follow up.
Well, stay tuned because there's going to be more.
You got it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's it for right now.
Okay, that's all we have. Excellent. So we are moving on to our report section, and we have the Educational Foundation with Carmen Colombat, who is, as best as I can tell, a saint. So please.
Thank you. And thank you, Chairman, School Board, and Superintendent. The Education Foundation, with our Red for Ed virtual supply drive, received right at $12,000 from individual donors, and they purchased 624 items. And we extended that for one more week since school was pushed back, and our orders are still coming in. We went into a mad dash for PPE, and we received a check today from $5,000 from the Leaner Trust, and combined with some other funds that we've scrambled together in the past couple of days, we placed an order for $10,000 worth of the surface disinfecting wipes that were to be delivered to the warehouse on Friday for distribution to the classrooms. And we have also collected right at 700 children's masks and about 400 adult masks, which we have stocked because it's my understanding from Mr. Carr's office that the state is supplying masks for every teacher and student. These extra masks will be placed into the Apple Mart stores so the teachers can get them. And we were also able to secure some small sanitizers, individual use. We received notice today that we were awarded $4,300 from the Emergency Food and Shelter Program from the county. And this will be used to purchase food for our homeless students. We're working through Student Services and Christine McCall there. We also, the county, as I'm sure most of you know, is allocating $5,000 to first come, first served nonprofits. And that application opened at noon today and we filed at 12:01. So we're hoping first come, first serve that we will be receiving that $5,000 nonprofit grant from the county. We have purchased 1,600 backpacks and the supplies that go into them. Funding from 800 of those came from Kefco Builders and Joe Zeiler. And those will be promoting with a luggage tag, his Speak Out campaign, which he kicked off in our middle and high schools last year. And those are being collated and boxed for distribution to every single school. So we will be supplying backpacks for every single elementary, every single middle, and every single high school. And I got an email. I had put in beg and I'll do a jig for you call to Disney for backpacks, and they were able to secure another 500 backpacks for us that should be delivered in the next day or two. And our Apple Mart stores, we made the announcement at Launch into Lake last Wednesday that we are opening all 3 of our Apple Mart stores for the 203 new teachers, and invitations have been sent individually to those teachers for August the 19th to make sure that at least at school opening, our new teachers will have supplies. And the next foundation board meeting is August the 26th at noon, and it is a Zoom meeting. Are there any questions?
Looks like not. Thank you so much for everything you've managed to give, especially given all of the difficulty with the economy. I know that it's a real challenge and I appreciate it, and we all appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Matthias, did you have a comment?
Nope. No, that was Mr. Caddy and on my phone.
I have a little tiny screen, so I'm trying to make sure everyone can talk. And we're moving on to the attorney's report. Thank you, Ms. Carmen Colombat.
It's a
So
video you
Mr.
made.
Johnson, attorney report, or Elizabeth, attorney
Mr.
report?
Johnson. Mr. Johnson says no. Elizabeth says no.
Okay. Moving on to new business consent agenda. Superintendent?
I recommend approval of consent agenda items 8.01 to 10.05.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Moving on to discussion. Superintendent? Oh, no, this is Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
The matter before the board is final approval of option 6A, attendance boundary adjustments for the 2021-22 school year. If there is anyone that wishes to speak to this matter, they should come forward at the present time. Dr. Weisskopf, is anybody in the queue to speak to this?
No, sir, they are not.
Madam Chairman, I believe it appropriate to close the public hearing.
Okay, very good. Superintendent, do we have a recommendation?
I do. I'd like to recommend final approval of option 6A, attendance boundary adjustments for the 21-22 school year.
So moved.
Second.
First and a second with Stephanie. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the superintendent's report.
So I wanted to take just a minute, knowing that this was a short agenda this evening, and just give you an update on our reopening plan and some of the work that's taken place over the past week or so since we last met. Some of you were able to join with me on Friday morning. I had the opportunity to speak before our Board of County Commissioners, where I did a funding request. And so I'm going to share with you that information that I shared with them, along with some additional pieces that I thought the board would find of interest in the public this evening. And I do have help from, and I've been calling him Mr. Katie. You called him Caddy. So now you're going to have to tell me which is right.
I would prefer Matt, but it's Katie.
Okay. Mean girls. So Matt is here as well. We know that that there may be some questions. He was very instrumental in helping us to put together this funding request, along with Tommy Carpenter, Director of Emergency Management, and Aaron Kissler with the Health Department. We met for several hours last Monday, and Mr. Matthias was there with me representing the board, and as well as many members of my staff and some of Mr. Katie's staff as well. So we had a nice group of people working through some of our finalizing our testing protocols that I will ask Mr. Katie to help me explain, as I've sent you a copy of that, board members, of this presentation that does include those testing protocols that I'll get to in just a second. But where I wanted to start, because I really think the conversation is very...
Sorry.
Somebody keeps playing with their phone. Is this graphic. This is the graphic that I know the board has seen, and I think it's just important because I think it frames our conversation about what we're doing to return students back to school. If we look at, this is the outcome of the parent intent forms that were submitted. I was just amazed I'm so proud of our parents. We had over 90% of our parents complete the intent form, and I don't know of any other district that had that type of participation rate. So great job to our parents. I want to thank our school administrators, Ms. Owens. They did a great job really pushing out this information, making sure that our parents did go online and complete an intent form. But what it shows us is that line is split right down the middle. We have about 50% of our students coming back to our brick and mortar schools, and we have 50% of our students split between both Lake Live and Lake Virtual, who aren't returning back to us. And so I think for us, our challenge is, how do we get all of our students back as soon as we possibly can to the safest environment possible? And that is certainly our goal and has been our work since March. To get our students back. So what you see on this graphic is about 20,000 students returning and about 20,000 students not returning. And so based on this information, we also, I'll show you the next slide too, because this is one we haven't really shown yet, is the outcome of our teacher intent form, which you can see that about 75% of our teachers did select that they are returning back to our traditional schools. And so I know they too, as they return today for day one, with some safety protocols in place, we're going to continue to intensify those as we head to the opening of school on the 24th, and I'll share some of the things still to come on that. But you can see the split here for our faculty as well. And in just a minute, Dr. Weiskopf will talk more about what we've done with the allocations and how those have been shifted. One of the things that I did share with the Board of County Commissioners, they had a question about our CARES Act funding and how those funds were being used, so I provided them a breakdown of those funds, including the total of the $7.2 million. And then if we'll continue on to the next slide, I gave them a breakdown, and Board, I wanted to stop a minute and explain to you, when we first brought to you our CARES Act budget, one of our intentions was to put some of that money in reserves and hold on to it, not knowing what some of those unanticipated costs might be. As we went into the school year, we knew that that we were going to need those funds, and as it's typically the case, those funds flowed from the federal government to the Florida Department of Education. The Florida Department of Education took a very different interpretation about the use of the funds, and our district, along with many others, they have yet to be approved. And so what we were told last week is that we needed to resubmit our budget. So this is a change from what you saw previously when Mr. Ward presented our CARES Act budget to you. What we do know is that we are going to be holding some monies for additional allocations. as we continue to see our virtual numbers grow. We know that we've shifted some allocations, but we couldn't deplete our brick and mortar schools because we do have a lot of students there. Remember, one of our guiding principles was to keep those class sizes as low as possible. We have talked about the transportation. That was in the original budget. We know that spreading out our bus routes is going to cause some additional expense for our drivers because they're actually going to be driving more hours. So it was a benefit to them and a benefit to us to be able to spread those out to intensify our cleaning in between the routes. We've also we'll be purchasing, in addition to what has already been expended for PPE, that's everything from masks, hand sanitizer, disinfecting wipes, a total of $1.1 million. We have an to be determined substitute cost, knowing that that cost will go up as well. We are able to use the CARES Act money to pay for the Chromebooks that we purchased. That was since March. That took us to that 1-to-1 number that we were really excited to get to finally. And we just got our quote from Verizon. We know that the hotspots that we're going to be able to deploy to homes without internet is $36,000 a month, so a total of $360,000. And that is how the new budget will be reflected when it is resubmitted to the state. So the things that we were asking for was above and beyond. We know that those are some of the basic things we need. But I know this board we've had conversation over the past several months about how do we do more? How do we do better for our kids? And so that's where I just was so grateful that Mr. Cady came into our world just really through a conversation with Mr. Mathias, who reached out and began a conversation with him about rapid testing, and that just has led to an amazing partnership. And he said, so let's look at some research and let's identify some of the top things that clinically we would recommend for intensifying your safety efforts as schools open. And so one of the things we knew, and we had talked to Ms. Cronin about this previously, about we needed to increase our janitorial custodial services. We know that as custodians may be out, that leaves schools without daily cleaning. So on an as-needed basis, we'll be able to contract with American Janitorial. That's a local company. That was one of our other goals, is how do we keep the funds local that we would be requesting from the county. And so we are engaging in a contract with American Janitorial. I know that I've already sent that over to Mr. Johnson and Ms. Turner, and they are working, and that's gone back to the company for a few revisions, so that's underway. This company will also come in. If we have a positive case in a classroom or schools and we need some deep intensive cleaning, they'll come in and do that. We're also looking to purchase a surface treatment that Mr. Cady introduced us to. This one in particular is MicroSure, and I'll talk more about that in just a second. And I know that you had some questions, Dr. Burns, on that item that you spoke to Mr. Carr about, and so I'm not sure if you have additional questions on that. And one of the things when I asked teachers earlier this summer about something that they would want, this idea of these desk and table partitions to separate students with the plexiglass or vinyl separations were something that they really wanted, and we've been able to find a local vendor who can actually do most of those for us. We're looking for an additional vendor for that as well still. So the timing on that is going to be hopefully here by the 24th. We might have to ask for a little grace and patience on those, but we're trying to get those done as soon as possible. We're also going to be purchasing temperature scanners for visitors, employees. These will be freestanding systems that are in the front office, so they will be screening every adult that comes in. We know that the thermometers were not something that was recommended clinically because students or children typically don't have fever as a primary symptom, but we do want to provide more thermometers for our clinics. And then we got to thinking about sports, and Mr. Farnsworth talked about how we're going to, if we're going to be bringing our fall sports back, which is our intent. The Florida High School Athletic Association has said on the 24th of August we can start developing our schedules for the football season. So we think about guests entering stadiums, temperature checking all guests coming in, every student before they take the field or the court, and as well as the opponents who come into our schools. We want to make sure that they are all temperature checked before they play. So those were our primary ask. I'm not going to go through these one by one. There are slides, so I'll ask Dr. Weiskopf just to kind of move quickly through those. If you have any questions, again, Mr. Cady can help me with some of these. In in particular, that MicroSure surface disinfectant. This was just the information of the cost of the, we can go on. We're also purchasing the foggers that we need because we're going to be doing that application through Mr. Carr's department, along with help from American Janitorial. We had the cost of the thermometers, and we had the cost of the temperature scanners as well. In the total funding request that was approved, and we are so grateful to our Board of County Commissioners who are giving us this $1.6 million to be able to purchase these additional safety items. And we know that that, along with the rapid testing and stuff that Mr. Katie will talk about in just a second, really, I think is when I think about, can I sleep at night? I'm still having some sleepless nights because I know that I still have 20,000 kids that aren't coming back to school. But we're going to continue every day to make sure that we do so in the safest way possible. And I'm just grateful to our county commissioners and to Mr. Katie and the rest of the team that pulled together last week to bring these items to you. And so I'm going to ask Mr. Katie just real quick to talk a little bit about what happened today. That was just the additional PPE that we purchased. And Again, I already mentioned the hand sanitizer, disinfecting wipes. If you want a breakdown of the PPE, that was included in the presentation as well. And I'm talking really fast, aren't I?
You sound like Stephanie.
And so I'm going to let, if you don't mind, just talk a little bit
Can you go
about how
back
things went
one
today.
slide?
I'm sorry, Dr. Burns?
Sorry, could you go back one slide? Because I think teachers would like to see the list.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And that
Well,
is why I put that on there, because the question was, when are we going to be getting these things? Some of the things are already in the schools. You can see that the hand sanitizer, they'll be available for every classroom. Those are all coming this week, as well as the dispensers, face masks. We have lots of face masks. Those are all in the schools already. We have more coming. If anybody's running out of those, we have access to more face masks. We did every teacher or employee had the opportunity to let us know if they wanted a face shield. Those have been ordered. You can see they'll be here right before school right before school starts. And then we have lots of PPE that were ordered by our school nurses. Those have already arrived as well. The disinfecting wipes, they'll be here by the 21st. These are all the delivery dates that we were promised. The gloves have already arrived, and the additional soap and dispensers, those should be here as well. So, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so a little bit about today, how that went. We know that our rapid testing was not real rapid, but I know that our teachers today were incredibly patient, and I have not had anyone who complained about having to wait, and I'm just so grateful that they realized how important it was, and thank you to you and your team for making it happen. So if you want to tell us about today, and then the ongoing screening for our employees and students, what that's going to look like. And then we do have the testing protocols if we want to talk about those a little bit. So I'll turn it over to you.
I'll take a one step back, though, that you guys are correct. Dr. Nagel, not Dr. Shirley Nagel, but her son Casey Nagel, was actually published this weekend in the Washington Post. And the article speaks to length about the damage that a child could have not being in a public school system or around their peers. It's actually a phenomenal op-ed if y'all want to read it, but it does speak exactly to the points you guys are saying. We need to get these kids back into a social, educational, safe environment. So it's a really interesting article there. To your point, we did complete just short of 2,000 tests today. We had less than 20 positives, which is phenomenal statistically. You should have tested a lot higher than that, but it's great. That means your teachers over the summer have taken the necessary precautions and played it safe. So it's a good sign from there. Testing was delayed today. We had almost a third of the attendees had a missed registration issue, so it did drag it on, but we've opened the sites up for the next 2 days that the teachers can come and go as they please. There should be a lot less of a wait time, and that way we can make sure we can get 100% of people. Should anybody have been missed, we're happy to have them back. The other thing was working through about 300 people as I left the office had either the wrong date of birth or the wrong phone number, which would prevent them access to our phone application. So we're reaching out to those people directly to resolve that way. Once they create an account with us throughout the year, they can request testing. They can see the results. It actually gives them a way to interact with us. It's HIPAA compliant. So we've kind of set it up for the long term, but today did have a little bit of struggles, but it should only be a one-time struggle, so it should only get better from here. Next, we did, told you less than 20 positives. You probably had about 3 times that test positive for antibodies, meaning that somewhere in the past they had it. At the age group that these tested, it's possible that they had it in the last 40 to 60 days, which is what we have found is how long antibodies last in that age group. I say a lot of this is hypothetical in theory because we don't know a lot about it. Although this SARS-2 does share an amazing amount of similarities to SARS-1, there are a couple things it does do differently, but in theory that very small percentage of your population has been infected today, which is a great sign. Going forward, we've opened key centers, one in Claremont, one in Leesburg, and one in Eustis. So should the schools encounter an outbreak or a concern, we're able to deploy quickly to either the school or the parents or teachers are able to very conveniently come by a testing location in their area. They can be tested, hopefully not as often as they would like, but as often as they felt needed. And then should there be an outbreak, we're able to address it very rapidly and very conveniently for those that may have transportation or time scheduling issues. So, any questions on our current process?
Can you tell me the 20, what was the next step then?
Oh, so with those 20, they have been, as I left the office today at about 5 o'clock, 16 had been spoken to and told to come back by one of 4 locations tomorrow to be confirmed with the PCR test. And the other 4 we were trying to reach as the time that I left. So we've personally spoken to them, let them know they need to quarantine until we see them tomorrow for the PCR test. And then at that point, they'll know for sure whether or not they are or not confirmed.
And for someone that doesn't really know all these acronyms, the
Okay.
PCR is the deep nasal?
The PCR is what we call the brain tickle. It's absolutely the industry standard. It's 100% basically a positivity rate if it's done properly. And the reason being is it actually looks for the RNA of the virus. So there's, if done properly, almost no chance of a false positive or negative.
And how long is the turnaround for that?
So currently right now with the national labs, it's anywhere from 12 to 21 days. We are working with a more local lab. Part of y'all's initiative was to shop local. Unfortunately, a lot of the labs that have opened up recently do not have a great track record. We're experimenting with one that used to offer our existing clinic different services to possibly offer a rapid turnaround or a quicker turnaround for the nasal swab test. If this works, it'd be a 36-hour turnaround. We signed a contract where we have to limit the amount we'll give them each week, but in doing so, we won't overburden them, and so they can keep to a 36-hour turnaround.
So to look at that employee, they now have gone into quarantine, and it would be expected 14 days.
Correct, but now I can have it back in 36 hours for
But
them.
with this, we'll be back at 36.
Yep. So the
That's
whole goal,
amazing.
yeah, the whole goal was to get your people, your students, a level of comfort, but then also return them to either work or school as quickly as positive, or to the point brought up earlier, confirm that there really is a need for them to quarantine. And we think with what we've devised, we can get pretty accurate.
But then also in their quarantine, in their house, is the whole house quarantined or just the individual?
That would
Whole
be,
house.
without testing them, what we've seen in the past is we suggest that you quarantine yourself, potentially use of a separate bathroom, separate bedroom. Let's not all go get in the kitchen at the same time. So we can only make suggestions. We're happy to test the whole extended family and kind of adapt as needed, but that would always be a risk.
Matt, I was, when you gave the presentation as far as the work session the other day, and you spoke about these additional protocols we put in place, most of those were based on you telling us. But maybe you could speak, because the public's listening right now.
Okay.
And speak about the mask versus the plexiglass, that both aren't necessarily required, one or the other, the distancing. What can people really do to stay safe?
So I'll talk to the extent of that I'm able to on that. When we sat in that meeting, I said there's, right now, perception-wise, there's almost 80% of perceived public panic, and 20% of what they're being told, I think, is actually probably realistically going to make a difference. This isn't a brand new virus. We have, like I said, 79% similar, identical to the last time SARS came through. So there is some true facts out there we can garner. If you're going to do social distancing, a mask and plexiglass, it is almost triple redundant. What you're trying to do is stop the spread through a mucus or a wet nodule, and but I think at that point, there is some benefit to the public perception portion of it, whereas we were taking every absolute precaution. You guys are dealing with children, so I can't imagine a kindergarten being able to keep his mask on all day. So I think having almost a triple layer of protection with that, although on the surface may seem redundant, but in the long term, especially with your population, is almost another step to guarantee, or not guarantee, but ensure they're as safe as humanly possible. And I think the other steps you've taken with the treatments on the surfaces, the additional cleaning, there's only so much you can do, and at this point, we've racked our brains and talked to numerous school districts, much larger than anything in Florida, and they're impressed with what you guys have approved and moved forward on.
Very grateful for you. Very grateful for meeting you, by the way.
I've got a couple other random things, but I'm sure I just want to make sure there's any questions on.
Yeah. I have a question. I don't feel like, well, you did address the question about antibody response. So the literature I've looked at tells me that your test is fabulous. It's an excellent test for testing antibodies. It's got like 98%, 96% accuracy. It's a good test. The question I have is, are the antibodies created by the body in the first week?
So the two things I can speak to that would be the sensitivity at the 72-hour mark. And then you guys may or may not be familiar with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's a foundation that Bill Gates
We're pretty familiar.
set up a massive fund to go fight infectious disease. He wrote an article this weekend in the New York Times, not Slimes. Huge article basically talking about that any test is better than our current test. And the reason being is with the long lead time with the national labs, there's so many people not being tested right now and are actually going through the system completely unknown or ignoring their symptoms. And so Bill Gates and a couple other people got together and just basically said, if we don't do something, the thought of us testing 357 million Americans with a 12-day turnaround is just, it's absolutely impossible. Keep in mind, the moment of the test tells me at this exact second I didn't test positive or hadn't manifested. I could literally walk out of the testing center, go to the gas station and contract it. So with a 10-day or 12-day turnaround or 20-day turnaround, there really is no clear path forward to reassuring everybody. Everything that we've seen, which is why we decided to march forward with the test, does show for a mass screening, there probably isn't a better scenario than with what's currently available. And I think that with the Gates Foundation coming out this weekend, it further cements that our current protocols, not y'all's current protocols, but as a nation, our current protocols are incredibly ineffective.
I agree. Can you tell me at what point does the IgM antibody peak in the body? Or at what level are you detecting on day 3? Or can you put me in touch with a technical expert that knows?
I absolutely could put you in touch with that. The more we've done this now, the more we've learned about antibodies. At the early stages, we thought antibodies kind of lingered on for quite a while. We're finding now that in a young person below 30, they can last as little as a week. And an average 40 to 60-year-old, they could last literally 40 to 60 days. So we used to do a different serology test to test for it. People come and ask, hey, I think I had it in February, and we're now able to tell them that there's nothing I can do because it's literally left your system. So as more is learned, I think everybody's adapting to it, but it is rapidly changing. But I'd be happy to put you in touch with the people behind the scenes if you'd like to talk with them.
Okay, so board, the real question behind this test that I can't answer because I don't have the data is it's much like a pregnancy test. You get pregnant, and then it takes like 2 weeks for your body to build up the stuff so that you can take the hormones and whatnot. So you can, so that the pregnancy test will be positive. If we don't have the antibodies, so we get infected and it takes time for the antibodies to build up in our system. So it has to be there to detect it. It's a great test once that stuff is there. But I think it might take a week or more for the IgM that we're testing for to actually be in the body. Once it's there, this test will find it. But will this test find it on day 3? That I cannot answer this question yet. I've looked in the literature too. I'm not finding a yes. So I need to be led towards a yes before I can honestly tell people that this test works for the purpose.
What we've seen is that the antibodies are, with the IgMs, are typically coinciding with the first display of symptoms. So where you're at that 3 to 4 day mark.
Okay, and you also mentioned you correlated it to the RNA test. Do you find a good correlation with your
As far as, like, a
positives?
false
I guess you
positive?
would find a good correlation with your positives, though.
Yeah, we haven't had any false positives yet.
Have you tested your negatives with PCR to see what your negative rate is?
So keep in mind, we do operate a large medical clinic here in Mount Dora.
Right.
So a lot of the negatives are existing patients of ours. When we first started, this service was just for our patients. We opened it in our parking lot thinking we'd have 20, 30 people come through, and then Mount Dora called us and said we're blocking traffic up for 7 blocks. So we've kept in touch with not only our own patient population, but a lot of those to my knowledge, we haven't really confirmed because we're talking thousands of negatives. We've not had anyone come back in that scenario. Now we've had them come test negative with us and then go get like a cheek swab antigen. That would come back positive, and then they question our test, so we confirm it with a PCR, and it's always come back negative. So to the extent of my knowledge, we've never had a false positive and any false negatives. We've been able to track back that it was either a time of infection where we tested them 24 hours after contact, or the other test was actually incorrect.
So you're finding in your practice that a 3-day test is pretty accurate. Do you have any stats or anything, or does the company?
That's what I said. I could put you in touch with the people behind the scenes.
Okay.
From everything I've looked at, not only was this the best test, but given the size and what the mission was to accomplish, you haven't really, there isn't anything better on the market. And I say that as
agree.
other companies much larger, well in excess of our size, have gone through with other experimental tested and have to issue massive recalls and had numerous things like that. Us to date have had, well, to date, we're still bulletproof.
Okay. I would like to speak with your technical people.
Sure.
Board, he is not selling a bad product. It is a good test. It's just whether or not I just want to see the data to make sure that his test will work and that the protein will be there, what they're testing for will actually be in our bodies.
Basically, the sensitivity at the 72-hour mark, they're not getting up to that for you.
That'd be great. Go ahead, Mr. Dodd.
Yeah, I think I share the same concern. The first question that popped in my mind was about this 3-day period. And I wasn't sure what justified having people go back after 3 days. Well, I guess one, that now we've got this added curveball that I wasn't even thinking of or aware of, that maybe the antibodies aren't even present in our children at 3 days. Therefore, the testing would then be a flawed system. But I know that when we approved our reopening plan, there was a decision tree from the Department of Health there as to how long people stay out in quarantine. And that had suggested that people would be out 14 days. And so then I double checked with the State Department. I called the COVID hotline, the state COVID hotline. They say that even if you have, so if you are exposed to somebody who is positive, you get a negative test, you should still finish out your 14-day quarantine. And that's the direction from the State Department of Health. So I'm confused as to where we as a local school board would say that we're going to make a decision that's different than the State Department of Health in their guidance on this.
I do think there's a variety of opinions out there. We've heard Dr. Fauci and Dr. Briggs come out recently weighing the options of an additional nationwide quarantine. You can compare areas, countries, cities, counties that have had quarantines versus no quarantine, mask mandates versus no mask mandates. But there are still some facts that remain. This isn't the first time that we've had to deal with this. 3 days post symptoms, much like the flu, to keep people out 10 to 14 days is almost a blanket statement, if I could say. Almost like when they say within your 15 minutes of being within 6 feet of somebody. It's a very blanket rule.
Arbitrary. Is that what you're looking for?
It's very, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that. I mean, I could sit next to somebody for 4 hours and not contract it, or I could contract it in 30 seconds next to you. So I think you really have to look at the data. Now, the only valid point that you could bring up is the fact that there is not a lot of data right now with antibody testing with children. There's an extensive amount for adults. There's not
But only on population studies, not as diagnostic.
The other one?
Only on population studies, not as diagnostic.
I would agree. And so that's why when we do get a positive, we are confirming it with the PCR test. But we would be in absolute gridlock if we tried to PCR test your whole, not only your teacher population, but your student population. Plus the viability of swabbing a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old would be fairly painful. So I think you have to weigh what's available and what's possible and navigate that with what you're comfortable with.
But I think where Mr. Dodd's coming from is that that we have said that after 3 days, you can come back and be tested again. And if you test negative again, then we're going to allow you back in the classroom. Isn't that what you're questioning, Mr. Dodd?
Which would potentially be 6 days after contact.
You know, and I understand Mr. Cady is you know, I guess under the impression that the state has arbitrarily picked, you know, some sort of period of quarantine. But when that information comes from the State Department of Health, I'm not sure how we as a local school board can decide to create something different that, you know, then completely ignores the advice of the people who are much more in the weeds on this than we are. Particularly after 3 days, we now have some doubt as to whether or not the kid even has the antibodies that would even show up on the test. So, I guess I wanted to back up from looking at other places. So I jumped and found a lot of information from Harvard Medical School, who says the same thing that our State Department of Health just said. And I guess what I'm hearing is that we're going to ignore even their research. And I don't feel comfortable doing that. I feel comfortable with the board-approved document that we've got. So I guess that's the other piece, is that we voted on a document that says that these kids are going to be quarantined 14 days. I'm not sure how now we can say it's 3 days without re-voting on that document.
So I wasn't present for the voting. I guess what I would ask you is, what were the protocols for, say, the common flu, or when MERS ripped through the population, or even H1N1? There was very light guidelines
MERS
with
didn't
that.
come to the U.S.
What?
Nothing. MERS didn't come here.
No, but we even looked worldwide with the World Health Organization. I would say at that point, we've made suggestions. We can back it up with the evidence that we have, but I mean, it would ultimately be to the school board's decision on what they'd want to do. But I do feel if 3 days after contact, they get a test and 3 days they're still negative, that's enough time past contact that if they were going to develop something, I would feel that the normal testing should probably uncover that. The other thing you look at is that the State Department said that the PCR test is the go-to. They didn't really delineate if that's an RT or a quantitative PCR test. Quantitative PCR test has an incredibly high rate of error right now. And so I think when we look at a lot of that information comes out, it's almost to some degree not very exacting. Does that make sense?
What is the typical date? I mean, how many days do they typically go asymptomatic? Isn't it 2 to 3?
Well, it manifests in the system is what the current data
Right.
suggests.
So you can be asymptomatic and have it, but typically, what's the time range, Dr. Burns, in the documents or Mr. Dodd, that you're seeing where people could actually not have symptoms before they're symptomatic and we could find these IgM antibodies?
I'm seeing a week
7 days?
Okay.
at the minimum. That's the problem. I was looking for shorter times.
Yeah, so what I read from Harvard says a lot of them are in the 5 to 6 day range, but 3 to 12 days seems to be the overall range, in which case they say, therefore, the CDC guidelines of 14 days would be justified based on this 12-day time period. But I mean, Dr. Burns, you're seeing 7 days. Harvard says 5 to 6. I mean, that's not 3. So that's where
But
I
he's
get
not
this.
suggesting 3, though. He's saying 3 and you come back and get tested again, correct?
Yeah,
So if
you're
you,
right.
3 days and then you're tested and then you have to wait 3 more days and get tested again, so it's 6 days.
So really the 3 day was spawned by the fact that if you just had contact right now, there was a teacher that was symptomatic and tested positive, it's pointless to rush that classroom to me an hour later.
Right.
Does that make sense? So we put the 3 day period in there to give the parents an expectation. There's really nothing, there's pointless to do anything in 72 hours. It doesn't matter which test we use with whatever the sensitivity or accuracy rate, there's nothing there for the first 3 days.
So let me understand this timeline a little better. Let's say I'm the teacher in the classroom, I test positive, and so now obviously it's pointless for all my kids to get tested today, right? Yeah. So they're going to wait 3 days, they'll get tested, and then if they're negative, are they coming back at that point?
Are they symptomatic or asymptomatic?
It doesn't matter in any case. Do we have people coming back after 3 days?
So can I just refer you, I sent this to you, do you mind going to the testing protocols chart, if you pull that up. Now remember, first of all, I just want to clarify, we are not ignoring the Department of Health or CDC guidelines. The director of the Department of Health was with us when these protocols were developed. And if you go and look at the most recent guidance from the CDC, it has taken that time period, correct me if I'm wrong, from 14 days to 10 days. So they themselves, as we learn more.
She's right.
And so the document that was board approved originally, remember, the intent was that as we learn more about the virus and things change, new things become available, it's got to be a fluid document. What we have in front of you is the document that was put together this past week with the Department of Health, and I can tell you, he pushed back on some of this. We went back for a second meeting the same day to come back and make some changes to this document so that I could get approval from the Department of Health on this. So there was a number of of folks who really contributed to this, but I want to just kind of walk you through it a little bit because it's answering some of the questions that you have. And what you'll see, if we go to the far right, that is the box, that symptomatic box. And this is where we had the majority of our conversation around, because anyone who is exhibiting symptoms, they're going to isolate the individual. And again, that's that 3 days. You're going to have to, from the date that you have your symptoms. No, I'm sorry, that one's not. That, as soon as you have symptoms, you can go ahead and get the rapid test, right?
And symptoms are displayed past 3 days.
Yes, so you would have already passed your 3-day mark when you went and got that rapid test. If you test positive, they're going to confirm it with a PCR test. That's another 2 to 3 days, right? Mm-hmm. So you're now at probably that 6-day mark. You're going to isolate for 3 days with no symptoms, but for a minimum of 10 days. Okay, that was the language that the health department wanted to ensure that we included in this so that we were in compliance with the CDC guidelines. And that was where the majority of our conversation actually took place. If we go to the other side, they have symptoms, but they were negative. Mr. Katie's group is going to be able to test for the flu, which is another great service that we can provide our parents. Because if they have symptoms, but they don't appear to have COVID, they may have the flu. And if they're positive for the flu, they're going to isolate for 3 days with no symptoms. And again, they will have already been out 3 days. So 3 days with no symptoms with the flu, positive or negative, before they can come back. So we're not just returning anybody back to the classroom. On the asymptomatic side, the very first column, you've had contact. So I am a teacher in the classroom, a student in my classroom has tested positive. I'm going to go home and I'm going to isolate for 3 days. And take a rapid test. If I am positive, I'm going to confirm it. Positive, 10 days. And again, there's guidance from CDC that you don't see 14 days, you see. If I have I am showing, and they're still in my system. Correct me if I am asymptomatic. I have no symptoms. I'm just a concerned individual, or maybe somebody recommended that I go test. Then you'll see the protocols for that one. I did it for 3 days. Remember, I've already been out probably days, potentially. The health department asked us to return to school unless otherwise excluded by a state epidemiologist. So what happens when we have anyone in our school, whether it's an adult or a child, who tests positive? We report that to this COVID response team. So every school has a contact. If it's an employee, and if it's a student, they contact someone in Chris Landry's and do the contact tracing with the Department of Health, notify them immediately that they need to go home and isolate for that 3-day period. Isolate as to how quarantine or isolate. So that ensures people that we're not just going to send you back. We're going to make sure that your exposure has been tested, you're negative, your exposure was not, maybe you were not around that individual, maybe it was just you were passing by, you weren't in direct contact with that person, you were with that individual, they may release you. But we don't, the Department of Health will work with to decide. So that's kind of that safety net.
And there's probably 2 other things I'd bring up. So the biggest concern I'd have is be a symptomatic person that tests negative. which is why we're calling it the flu test in order just to keep it simple, but it's actually more of a respiratory panel. It's a false negative. So
I
if you're
like that.
wide are, well, you tested negative, we're not sure why you feel that way. Our thought was that if we could answer why they had that condition, we could not only eliminate the fact that here's how to treat it, it's whatever it may be, and at least send them home with some level of comfort, and then also give us a level of comfort knowing that there wasn't a false negative out there. The other thing I was saying too is as we quote the data, CDC's gone from 2.2, gone from mask or ineffective to mask or effective. So I think you'll see that kind of everybody's evolving to best address as we learn. But we go back to 1957, 1958. Fortunate Americans are what we're currently experiencing. And there's hard data that we can learn from.
Mr. Dodd.
Oh, so portion.
Yeah,
So
I'm
it's-
concerned about purple too.
So if I'm the teacher, I have had contact with 15 students in my class. After 3, you're going to take it. Is the default. I guess this asterisk unless otherwise excluded by a state epidemiologist. But are we calling the state epidemiologist and saying Miss Room has might not even have the antibody? The state health department is saying, I don't understand how they're in conflict with the local health department. Department is giving one piece of information.
Still virus. We know now. Did a little bit of experimental testing over the summer. Summer camp wasn't in your county. Don't ever develop outweighed by the damage it could do the child elsewhere. But like very fluid and would remain fluid as we know more, much like you've seen the CDC, the WHO, and almost all authorities remain very fluid with what they're.
And we've been learning that we have to be able to make, as we know better, we do better, right? I get that. But I'm still just having trouble reconciling when somebody asks me, how you as a local school board can make a decision that was different than what your state Department of Health is saying. I don't know how to answer that question.
See,
Because
I'm
the
okay.
state says that you will finish out your quarantine period even with a negative test if you have had contact with a positive COVID
When we
patient.
say confirmed contact, like we just spoke about, we have masks, social distance. So you do have other. No, I'm saying you're taking a lot of steps to mitigate that. Now keep in mind the
Right,
child
I
could
get
leave. Go ahead.
And when you do contact tracing, don't they
We
ask
do, we do.
6 feet and masks, right? That's part of the contact tracing conversation that happens?
They do, which is why that kind of caveat was put in there, because they're going to look at things. Like, were they wearing masks? Were you behind the plexiglass? How far socially distanced were you? How long was your contact? remember the Department of Health, they went through and made the being one of them to make sure that they have the final say on actually when those students return if they test negative. So I'm not real sure. Is that and if whether they're positive or negative? If this was done in that's really what we were asking. And we got some, and I would ask that we do that. I think that have a plan here. I'm certainly we'll go with the will of the board if you want to make changes to this document.
And Mr. Dodd, I will do that because I've been in the room with Aaron from the local Tallahassee.
Do you have any information that's different than what the state?
That's in part because this is really cutting edge. And there is he is that's why I was asking. They may be there that show that it shows up earlier, but I couldn't find them. But more accurate. It's frustrating.
Employee staff we've had 2 employees test positive. We were one of the earliest testers here in Lake County. We've now tested almost 30 people. We see on 200 patients a day. They tested positive, both caught it over the weekend on vacation. Everything you've done is going to remain outside of the classroom where we don't have eyes, ears, or any way to brought up what happened. Remember, for all we know, we have no idea what the father, mother, and almost the radar from what we've laid forth here.
I wanted to ask you, you just mentioned hundreds of cases. So you're getting a fair number of threes? Do you get a lot of data?
When actually had a confirmed contact. If we're lucky, it's in a scenario that's somewhat controlled where we can trace it back to, yes, this is where that occurred. But in a normal person quarantine environment, and that would have occurred to start that clock ticking. So what we do record is when the our drive-throughs or our test
Board, 6 days, something like making that a flu after we look at the data clear.
I think we've got an act that says unless otherwise by a state epidemiologist.
And about a 6 Saturday, Sunday, 5 school days, and you got 2 others, so you're looking at 9 days there. Days and they're back if it coincides with
it's like I just don't know how many false negative what percent not the
tubes. I've seen that. That's good. I mean, the 5, that should be available.
But he just said that they can't identify the day
Yeah,
that the
so I
person
can tell you,
contracted the disease.
You have a hard time outside of a quarantine scenario of the non-disclosure agreement. Be giving a all controlled. So I will actually have real world data from your zip code in the very near future that'll treat preventative. So
Wow.
we're one of
Okay.
only four places in the country that are with their studies, and then there's also a couple other large drug manufacturers that are doing some pretty interesting. That here in the near future, but right now it's hard to identify when day 1 occurred.
Okay.
But we are able to just. See symptoms and you're negative. In my office right now, there's over a dozen tests that we chose not to use. Important component.
I think that's a brilliant idea.
Okay.
Do we have any children disease? Because I've heard both sides of the spectrum on that in regards to my sister's pediatrician just told her don't. But then we've also heard the complete opposite, that they could spread it and not have any symptoms. And so do you have any?
So far over the history of COVID, we've heard, like I said, masks don't work, they do work. We've heard it doesn't spread from human contact, it does spread from human. So we've heard a multitude of things. As of right now, the statistics actually have effects from COVID. They may show fever, but it's a fractional of 1% will actually visit a medical professional.
Do we have any? That there was the students that had no of them have symptoms after they were interacting with the children.
These summer camp, late teens, if we're lucky, into the early 20s, is indestructible. Pink eye is a breeze. I can see it, I can know. With this fly, with so many asymptomatic people, it's really difficult. And that's
I agree with that.
Out of school, extra days. I feel like it's negative and that could negatively impact the class, that we would actually have the reverse of that and have students that were out for allergies or other reasons. I don't know.
perfect example. So maybe 3 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, remember the Sahara sand came over the state of Florida?
Yes.
It was unbelievable. Literally, your whole county thought they had COVID for 2 days.
Yes.
They were all my drops. And so that was the point of identifying why you feel this way. Because people right now are they're bound by
Yes,
fear.
they are.
And so I think it's really important that we explain why are you feeling this way. There just is not a lot of data
Yeah,
right now.
I hear you.
And I apologize for that, but we're, based on prior very, very similar viruses is what I kind of consider to be a good indicator. Past that, it's hard to say. But I would go back to the what came out in the New York Times this weekend, that they kind of lockstep agree with us that in order
I
to
saw that.
yeah, is you're going to have to start doing mass testing. And they even said bad tests are better than waiting on a test.
Yeah.
Not that I'm calling ours bad tests, but they actually feel that if you look statistically, lowering the bar, saying a test doesn't have to be 96% accurate, but can be used 6 times more, there's a lot more benefit to the population than that. I think you could look at too is through the lockdown period, the sharp increase of suicides, drug overdoses, spousal abuse, and things in our older population went up catastrophically. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of pediatrics data because we're not a pediatric practice. So then I would lend yourself to Dr. Nagel in the Washington Post article talking about, from a pediatric standpoint, the damage of keeping child out of school if it's preventable at all costs.
And even with the test you did, the 2,000 with 20 positive, we're at 1%, which is about where?
You're right, yeah, you're fine. I mean, that's phenomenal. That's actually lower than other companies we've tested, other segments we've tested. Some of your teachers we tested are of an age where they should be concerned, and they were all good to go. So it seemed to be your younger teachers that may have gone off this summer.
Right.
So
All right.
after the 3 days, can you remind me where these kids would go to get their tests? After, you know, a teacher or somebody in the classroom has got a positive test, so then they tell everybody to go get tested. Where would they go?
So we've made two options available. We've designed what I call a SWAT team, which is a person per district, South Quantico. Well, that way if you need someone, we can dispatch them. The Claremont area, Leesburg area, and then what I call the Tri-City area, Eustis, Tavares, and Mount Dora. Then there's brick and mortar stores. There's one in Leesburg. We're putting one in Claremont right now. We should be announcing that soon. And then we're operating one in Eustis also. So whether we come to you or they come to us, it's really around their convenience. The Leesburg location will be open almost 12 hours a day. So we're able to catch them before work or after work. And we're just trying to make it as easy as possible. Again, I think the easier the public can get access to these tests and get answers, the quicker we can uncover where we stand.
So let's say I'm a teacher at an elementary school in Claremont, and you know, so now the class needs to go get tested 3 days later. Is it going to be kind of like a drive-through sort of method at that school? Obviously, these kids are not going to come in the building, right?
No, we actually don't. I prefer them not to come back to your school. That's why we've set up these off-site locations. So you have a class, maybe 15 to 20 children. They could come by at their leisure and be tested. And then, given our arrangement, they would need to produce the results to the school to kind of clear their path back in.
All right, because certainly the one benefit of this kind of testing is you get results quickly. The drawback would be like, oh, I think my kid has COVID. I'm going to send him to school to get tested. And that would be like worst case scenario, right? Because we'll get a quick result. So I appreciate that these
The public has
off-site-
access to these tests, but outside of the 3 locations we're talking about, because I don't want your locations becoming as bogged down as some of our other locations. Again, I want to remove all the barriers from the public your public being able to gain access to these tests. So these are kind of 3 off-label locations that really only the school district and a couple of county employers will have access to. So you'll never have the drive-through scenario where we have multiple hour waits.
All right, that's good.
Very good. Any other questions, board?
So,
I just
so
want
I
to
guess
go ahead, Mr. Dodd.
my question isn't necessarily for Mr. Katie, but this now prompts, I guess, just trying to understand the process here. So today we had, I guess, I don't know the exact number, but somewhere less than 20 teachers test positive. So what does that look like from a notification standpoint to us? I think when I had my individual board member meeting last week, Dr. Weiskopf was maybe theorizing that we might be able to use the page out system that we get notified of, you know, when we have ambulances, for instance, report to schools to transport students. Is that kind of where we're landing for us to know what's going on with testing and positive identification, or
Yeah,
another process?
I was wondering about that too. Like, will we have reports?
So I'm
COVID
willing to give you
reports?
whatever you'd like. We worked with the emergency operation when we were doing the large scale testing for the county. So obviously bound by HIPAA, I can't say that she's the one that has it. Past that, I could work with you any way you would like to. Today, I just kind of informally told you the 20 because truly the ink is still drying. Those patients would have been notified via either their phone app or via email. Today, we actually called them immediately because we didn't want them coming back to school or coming into school tomorrow. And they were encouraged to come and get a confirmation test at any one of the sites first thing in the morning. Because the sooner we could tell them, the sooner they could either get back.
I feel like we just
was that the problem is they're educating or interviewing that shouldn't.
on the outlet. I think that's HIPAA compliance, but just gives us the picture of happening positivity wise, so we know who's going and
often. And that's the exact reason why, is because the message can be misconstrued. As a Kingsburg, yes, there was anything you guys could dream up. I can give you non-demographic results. There's any number of ways we could do this.
Well, he was going to create a dashboard because then feeding all around.
I would agree. My only concern, go to that level, we could work it out. If you guys are happy with the adapt, we could accommodate whatever you'd like. Here, what zip code, whatever.
That's great.
If I could just, Mr. Dodd, it was you and I that were talking about that last week, and I think we talked about, we would, our intern be more like we've had an exposure, exposed at some, and I'll have to work with Chad and his team as well, determine get on that, because I don't know that we could get to the classroom. We can't information, so we'll have to just work that out, but we will be able to give you a report, just like I talked about, like just as we do less, and we for an internal method. I just don't know how specific we can be, but I'll look into that.
But that is exposed and the class is I mean,
yeah.
administrator put a call. The other is about fear again, as we go back to fear. And so the call out for that school, so we're not spreading panic everywhere and that they know that we have it under control, would go a long way rather than it reaching social media.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and I think we'll work with Sherry with an incident that happens sometimes when we have some on campuses. Incident we do parents that we've notified, and we have a script for that.
At the end of the day, what's your need be?
Actually, I would love for us to have. Then I think it's good if
we experienced that this or that we that about EOC is impacted.
Like, just briefly, I it up, but I was just thinking of like a high school class where, right? So the teen for, but with test after 3 days, just from being exposed to that teacher, that whole group of 5 kids or whatever is be first to the rest of the high school, whatever.
But keep in mind, Mr. Burns, it isn't proximity were you? What were the other protocols on your face?
Or the rapid test,
I hear you. Okay, just give me the data.
Just want to point out something also. I know we're talking basically here about teachers and students, but this is also on the support side as well that all these come into. I don't want the support side to think that we're only looking at this on the instructional and the student, but this is also the support as well. So don't want to leave you out.
Have we screened our bus drivers?
it's the 24th.
The 24th.
Good.
21st.
Great, thank you.
The 21st.
Yes.
21st.
They're driving
They're
buses the 24th.
So
There-
I'm sorry, and then the 18th is the food services. So we did test the year 3 segments.
Nice.
Great. Okay, board, any other questions?
I just have one comment, and that is you have absolutely been amazing. Not
thank
just
you.
a resource for this process, but also through each of the steps for this board member who sells pots and pans for a living. And so very grateful that you are in Lake County and that you've stepped up to help us.
Thank you.
Yeah, if someone
Yes.
was tested, say, 4 weeks ago and it was negative, do they still need to be tested?
If you were negative 5 minutes ago, you should probably be tested. And that's why it's such a,
Well, the only reason I asked, my wife.
it's a, yeah. It's a rabbit hole
She
you
had
could
surgery
chase.
about 4 weeks ago and had to be tested prior,
Yep.
so,
Was the surgery here locally?
oh, yeah.
Yeah, we'd probably process that test.
Yeah.
But yeah, you would, again, you would have to look at your scenario. Was there confirmed contact? Did someone sneeze on you? Have you led a relatively healthy lifestyle?
We try.
There we go. Obviously, when you have less than 1% show up infected today.
Well
That's
done.
good.
Very
Thank you
grateful.
very much.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks so much.
Thank you for everything.
Yes. Thank you very much for your partnership with us and also for being so, I don't want to come off as implying at all. You clearly have a very high level of competence and I look forward to looking at the information and I appreciate the collaboration with the district so much. Thank you. Okay. So we're done with that. We are done with that, right? Correct?
Yes, I just have 2 letters of condolences. Cheryl Fischel, she was the mother of Stephanie Henry, our ESE school specialist at Lost Lake Elementary School, so condolences to her family. And Nancy Moody is a teacher at Lost Lake Elementary. She lost her husband, Daniel Hunsinger.
Okay. Mr. Dodd, would you like to go? Oh, wait. Is he here?
We lost him.
Lost him. Okay. Miss Luke.
Oh, I would like to also thank Mr. Mathias for reaching out. I know that was something that you personally did, and so we appreciate that very much. It was the foresight into it was fantastic, and the fact that you found somebody like Mr. Katie is going to benefit everybody. So it makes me feel more comfortable. I've heard I've heard from several people positive remarks about having the availability of testing. And I know Christine Palmer on our committee, the task force committee, was speaking about the concern of our employees having to wait 20 days for a positive or a negative test and then waiting another 20 days for another one. So I think this will help alleviate a lot of those concerns for our staff, and I appreciate you doing that. I also just wanted to welcome everybody back. I know that we had our teachers back today, and I'm going to tell you guys, like, I was stumped. Like, I thought, let me find a quote, let me find something I can say, and there's nothing to say. I think that we appreciate you is huge. I think we appreciate you, Superintendent, and your staff. They've been working tirelessly, and now I just see our administrators and our teachers picking that wand up and working in the same manner. And in the same way, I've seen tons of encouraging things. I can tell you that some of the Bitmoji social media posts that teachers are putting together for their students are amazing. And I was talking actually with Mr. Farnsworth a little bit earlier. We've overcome and now we're dealing with this. Our and we
Would you like to speak?
Sure. I just have a question, Dr. Weisskopf. You can get dealing at the high schools with kids that would be in dual enrollment in the college, of how that's going to pan out, because some of their classes may not work with some of our regular school classes because of the block schedule. So if I can meet with you maybe this week and try to go over that, so I could kind of walk them through. And I just want to also, was what Ms. Luke was speaking to Mr. Mathias about. I appreciate all that he's endeavored to do this, to bring this to Lake County school system, and to taking the kind of the lead on this and getting it to put it together. But also what I'd like to say I appreciate is on Facebook, where he goes on Lake County politics and he posts this, and then he takes and he starts answering everybody's questions, because I don't want to get into answering those questions. I appreciate him taking the lead on that also. But he has done a great job in helping the superintendent and the staff bring this together with the county, and I appreciate that. Also going to the county and asking for the money to help us with the CARES Act money that they have to be able to fund these projects that we're trying to do. The other thing, I brought this up weeks ago when we were discussing this, and the plexiglass panels came into mention. One of the things I brought up is our cashiers at our cafeterias are concerned, and they need something there to protect them, and if a plexiglass panel possibly could be put there as well. Some of them are concerned about handling money versus a student being able to just put their number in or just flash a card across and be able to scan it versus having to do the money. But that would be up to the parents going on to the app and putting money into that account, so that would not have to be done. One of the last things I have is, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, or actually, and this coming Sunday, August 16th at 7 p.m., there will be a group of denominations and organizational churches that will be meeting at all campuses in Lake County schools and Sumter County schools to have a prayer vigil, to pray for the students and the staff at each of these sites. If you would like to participate in this, if your church come out, this is not one individual church, this is any church that would like to come out, that you would like to come out and participate, be there at that campus by 6:30 to 6:45. It will promptly start at 7 o'clock. So we would like for you to come and join us if you would. Personally, I will be at Tavares Elementary myself. Like to see a crowd of you there as we pray for our students and our staff safety this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gimbel. Oh, Mr. Dodd is back. Go ahead, Mr. Dodd.
Well, thanks for letting me jump in before we lose power again. It is quite stormy in Claremont.
Wow.
Yeah, it's the heavens are opening up, so I guess I better talk fast. I'm not quite sure which board members have said comments before me, so I'll go
We've
back.
had Miss Luke and Mr. Gamble.
All right, very good. Well, I'll go back and rewatch what I missed because I know what you all had to say was probably important. And I know it's been controversial for some time as to whether or not we're even should be reopening schools for face-to-face instruction. I know that now that has been decided, I'm going to personally commend the work that this district has done, I think, under the circumstances. I know that the effort is there to create the safest environment that we can possibly make. And I know that we're not going to be able to contain this 100%, but I think that the added measures we've done really shows that we are just trying to do everything that we possibly. I'll talk to you that have shared these added safety measures. They're surprised. They're not. They're in a bit of disbelief that we're able to go through such magnitude and widespread to do this. The piece that I'm really still struggling with in all of this is the state's lack of leadership. It seems to me after our letter arrived in Tallahassee, we instantly saw the governor go around and quickly silence the local health departments. I had gotten a call from a board member in another county who said that she doesn't understand how we're able to talk with our health department because theirs won't talk to them anymore. And I'm not sure how school districts and boards are able to make those sorts of decisions without relying on health professionals. So it's bizarre to me that the state would not want them to have that sort of input, but nonetheless they are. The other big frustration that board member had shared was how the state is holding this CARES Act money hostage. And once again, I go back to the state. If they're really serious about us reopening and to do it safely, they've got to release that money to school districts so that they can go out and buy their PPE supplies. Already, I think the funding level that was given to us in that is grossly inadequate for all the things that we really need. But I guess for that, it shows how blessed we are to have a very supportive county commission. So I'm thankful for them coming to our rescue. And I guess the other piece of positive news is it's been nice last few days to see the positivity percentage coming down here in our county. And I just hope that trend continues. I know that everybody's out there trying to do their part, and I know we're all impatient, but keep at it.
Very good. Okay, Mr. Matthias.
Yeah. Actually, I want to play on Sandy for just a minute. Sidney Brock, Pastor Sidney Brock, I suppose. He sent me information, and it's schoolprayer.info. And so it'll give you some background on the movement that Mr. Gamble was just speaking about. But I'm convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, nothing would have come together like this had this board member not prayed every night as we carried the burden of this opening of schools and what that would look like. Not if, but when we had, and then Mr. Cady came along, and the county commission came. I am grateful.
Thank you very much. Ms. Carr, because I have been, it was asked that I speak to let actually.
You're going to get him right now.
Okay. And or Miss site will Ms. Owens translate some documents so that we have a transparency website for the chemicals that we're using, because parents want to know what exactly we're using. Hand sanitizer, what are the ingredients? People are worried about allergies and stuff. So Mr. Carr, could you speak to what we're using?
Sure. Hold on a second.
Because I know we have the hand sanitizer and there's the desks. I gave him a heads up. Wait, did he leave?
No, he's back.
No, I'm back. I had to get my paperwork. I dashed in.
Oh, sorry.
I was intrigued with Matt. We were talking about other things, and so sorry, Sherry got me. But yeah, basically we're using an alcohol-based hand cleaner right now, sponsored by Be Clean, or manufactured by Be Clean. As a matter of fact, prior to this meeting, I did look at the FDA website and viewed actually 100 entries. Is what beauty salons it actually spheres that virus touches that are on it, it actually pierces and kills. Immune to, or not really immune because it's not alive, but it's very basically any high touch area to include handles. This is what we're very out, believe it or not, with some other products as well. Yeah, you can. I was going to say that, but yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much. Is
Thank
there
you, Ms.
anything
Paul.
else
Thanks.
that there was to be applied? I think that's it, right?
I'm sorry, I apologize.
The desks, and it was actually me. I actually and with the military, they were asking me to create products like this. So this is a legit product. It's been out for the military for quite some time, and it does, just like John said, it creates all these spikes. It's nano spikes, which is tiny. So that's what that product is, and actually teachers, because I know there's so much fear there, because this is a good plan. We have the stuff to clean we have cleaning agents, hand sanitizers, all the PPE, everything should be provided, and we should have a good plan ready, and it should be safe. It really should be at this point, as we've talked about. It's layers upon layers upon layers of protection. And this board has come up with everything I could possibly think of. So congratulations, welcome back. I hope everyone had a good first day as, in your room as teachers. And I look forward to school eventually starting. So with that, yes, let's be adjourned.